Before then, we have, the migration. The history shows us the Moorish migration from the Iberian Peninsula, them coming up from North Africa up to Europe, and their influence on European culture and the development of European culture. We also look at, in BCE, we look at the Roman occupation. So we have the first Black emperor called Septimus Severus coming to England and establishing the developments of the road from Londinium, which is London, up to York, which at the time was Eboracum. And looking at the presence within the Roman Empire, because the empires that predate the British Empire, we have the Greek empires, Persian empires, but they all had the cosmopolitan empire filled with Africans who looked like you and me. And the influences of our science, of our architecture, of our mathematics, and of our linguistics has been something that has been traveling around the world. So the concepts that many of Europeans have been able to develop within their own ideologies have come from the influences based on the migration of Africans throughout time. When it comes down to history, history is not designed for others to be empowered from the local history of the region that they're in. It's for the people who are in the region. But as I share, like every 100 years, you possibly have 5 generations, because people generally have children between the ages of 20 to 25, sometimes often younger, but just to make it easier to look at, every 100 years, you would have 5 generations. That's every 20 years. But when you get to the end of that migration, of that tier, you then get into the next generation. This generation is now dying. So whatever they have taught this generation, they have to decide whether or not they're going to take anything more from that to then pass on to this generation. And then again, things are lost in translation along the way. People don't remember the story, who's documented the story, who's able to read, who's able to write. And as a result, we're just remembering bits of history that either haven't been documented or have been documented in a language that people no longer are able to understand. So what is left, they're able to then start pulling together to try and keep abreast of what's happened historically. And then sometimes there's a lot of embellishment that comes with that. But when it comes down to looking at what classifies as an African, we also have to look at the terms given to people from the continent at that time. So when you're looking at history, it may not have been African, it may have been Ethiopic, or people coming from different regions. So when you're looking far back in time, it's also important to know that some of the terms that we relate to today didn't exist back then. Wherever you go in the world, history is universally created based on the infrastructure we're in. So let's look at the continent of Africa, for instance. Before colonialism, how was our history passed down? It's in our language, it's in our traditions, it's in our ceremonies, it's in our rites of passage, it's in storytelling, it's in our agriculture, it's in knowing the migrations of animals, the seasons, it's in all of that, it's in everything that surrounds us. When the European came and gave us their education, so now we was going to school, in a sense of going to get a ready-made structure of education, we were getting a concept around what had history, geography, math, science, all of those subjects, their perspectives. But what people also don't correlate is that all the education that we receive is not systematically the same. So when they say, yes, we taught you, they could be in your classroom saying 2 + 2 is 7. Knowing that that's not the correct answer, but you're not in the classroom to know what they're teaching, then you make the assumption that the student has learned from the teacher. And it wasn't designed for Africans to be educated properly unless they show that they were extremely gifted for them to be utilized by Europeans to be able to continue to share the history as it was taught by Europeans to the next generation. So when we're looking at history, it's important that we don't look at it from, the concept of that people were doing the right thing. The right thing wasn't being done all over the continent of Africa. And if you teach the right thing, it empowers people to then go on and do the right thing. But that's just a concept to add to the fact that when we're looking at things, we all want to be clever. We all want to be seen to be getting it right. But if we haven't been taught right, how then we then put measures on it and then disempower one another for not getting the answer that some of us have been taught right to get, that others have not been taught right to get.